Everything you call reality is an echo of the images you create mentally.
The events around you are delayed effects of fantasies that you feed in silence, and this awareness awakens a discomfort you can't ignore. Remember when a recurring thought preceded a concrete event? It seems like your mind wrote the script.
Neville Goddard states that there exists an invisible self that navigates through dimensions and organizes the circumstances according to the feeling you assume. When you test this thesis in simple situations, you realize that coincidences become the pattern. Small imaginative experiences produce physical results, and chance loses its meaning. You understand that your identity merges with what it manifests, and there's no longer a separation between what creates and what experiences. Every imagined choice reverberates in your life, and postponing this responsibility is to abdicate the power that has always been in your hands.
There exists a hidden truth that the ancient masters knew, and that was deliberately kept away from the masses. A truth so powerful that it would completely transform your understanding of who you are and how reality works. Neville Goddard revealed this truth. You are not trapped in the 3 dimensions of physical space. You possess a 4-dimensional self, a consciousness that operates beyond the limitations of time and space, capable of shaping physical reality through the power of imagination. Stop for a moment and consider this. Everything you experience as the external world first existed in your imagination. That house you live in, the job you have, the relationships you cultivate, all were first conceived in the invisible dimension of consciousness before manifesting in the world of the 5 senses. Goddard teaches that when you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, when you truly feel that you already are what you desire to be, your 4-dimensional self automatically finds the pathways to materialize that desire in 3-dimensional reality. The external world is not as solid and unchangeable as it seems. It molds and interprets itself constantly through human consciousness. Every object, every circumstance, every event in your life is a solidified projection of previous states of consciousness. You don't see things as they are, you see things as you are. This is not abstract philosophy or superficial positive thinking. It's the fundamental mechanics of how reality operates. Your 4-dimensional self is that part of you that transcends physical appearances. While your physical body is limited to one place at a time, your consciousness can instantly travel to any point in time or space through imagination. At this exact moment, you can close your eyes and be in Paris, in Tokyo, or anywhere you choose. You can be in the future, experiencing the fulfillment of your desires as if they were already accomplished facts. Imagination contains all the possibilities that have ever existed or will exist. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything already exists in infinite imagination, waiting to be selected and brought into physical manifestation. When you understand this deeply, you realize that you're not creating anything new, but rather selecting from an infinite set of already existing possibilities, the experience you wish to live. The spiritual self recognizes this truth. Everything that exists in imagination can and will manifest in the physical reality of the 5 senses when properly assumed. Here's the secret that few understand. Experiencing in imagination exactly what you would experience in reality upon achieving your goal is the most direct and powerful method of realization. It's not passive visualization nor hopeful daydreaming. It's the complete sensory experience, lived internally with such intensity that your nervous system cannot distinguish between the imagined and the physical. When you see, hear, touch, smell, and taste in imagination with crystal clarity, you're literally planting seeds in the 4-dimensional field of consciousness. This imaginary experience of the end, when completely accepted and felt as real, automatically determines the means for its realization. You don't need to know how. You don't need to know the steps. The paths reveal themselves naturally, the synchronicities align, the opportunities appear out of nowhere, but nothing is a coincidence. Everything is the mathematical result of the law. Imagination, persistently held and felt as real, must manifest in the physical world. Think about this. Every great invention, every work of art, every advance of humanity existed first in the imagination of someone who dared to assume its reality before there was any physical evidence. The telephone existed in Alexander Graham Bell's mind before it existed in the world. The airplane flew in the Wright brothers' imagination years before Kitty Hawk. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They assumed the feeling of fulfillment and allowed the world to reorganize itself to match their internal assumption. You possess this same capacity. Your four-dimensional self is constantly creating your reality based on the assumptions you hold about yourself. The question is not whether this works. It's working right now, whether you're aware of it or not. The question is, will you continue being a victim of unconscious assumptions, or will you take conscious command of this creative power? The next step of this journey will reveal how your beliefs act as portals or barriers between you and the life you truly desire to live. Between imagining and experiencing, there exists a subtle territory in which your assumptions determine what will manifest in your life. Neville Goddard reveals a fundamental truth. Remaining faithful to the assumption of the feeling of the wish fulfilled eliminates the need to discover and change individual beliefs. This state of permanence in the feeling of the fulfilled desire is what Goddard calls faith. Faith works exclusively with the four-dimensional or spiritual self. It is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Goddard teaches that faith is the consciousness of already being what you desire to be. It's not a mental or emotional effort, it's a state of being. When you maintain this consciousness, all necessary transformations occur automatically, without you needing to identify or combat each limiting belief individually. The natural self, that part of you intimately connected to the five senses, interprets sensory experiences and forms conclusions about reality. You see scarcity and conclude that resources are limited. You experience rejection and decide that you're not loved. You observe illness and accept that you're sick. These sensory interpretations create a world of beliefs that seem like solid and unchangeable facts. The natural self lives completely in the world of effects, always reacting to what has already been created. The spiritual self operates in a completely different dimension. It provides an accurate interpretation of your vision through conversation with your true inner voice. This voice doesn't argue with appearances. It simply declares the truth of the assumed state. When you hear this voice, there's no doubt, no questioning. There's only the serene knowledge that what you've assumed is already yours. Goddard discovered, through personal experience, that when you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persist in that assumption, you're not fighting against limiting beliefs. You're operating above them. It's like going up to a higher floor of a building. The obstacles on the lower floor still exist, but they can no longer impede your movement because you're no longer on that level. Consider how it works in practice. A person may carry the deep belief that relationships always end in pain. This belief was formed through past experiences, reinforced by observation, and solidified by repetition. If she tries to change this belief by arguing with it, analyzing it, or repeating contrary affirmations, she's still operating at the level where the belief exists. But when she assumes the feeling of already being in a loving and harmonious relationship, when she sleeps every night feeling loved and secure, she transcends the field where the limiting belief operates. The process is not one of destruction, but of transcendence. Limiting beliefs are not attacked or eliminated. They simply become irrelevant because you're no longer tuned to their frequency. It's the difference between trying to destroy a radio station that broadcasts unpleasant music versus simply tuning into another station. The old station continues broadcasting, but you no longer hear it because you're tuned to another frequency. The true inner voice of the spiritual self always speaks in terms of present fulfillment. It doesn't say you will have or you will get. It declares you are and you have. This is the language of faith, not faith in something future, but faith in the present reality of what the senses don't yet perceive. Goddard repeatedly emphasizes, you must assume that you already are what you desire to be. When you truly understand that faith is simply remaining in the state of the wish fulfilled, all the hard work of fixing your beliefs reveals itself as unnecessary. You don't need to dig into your past looking for traumas. You don't need to identify every limiting thought. You need only to discipline your imagination to remain faithful to the desired state. The natural self will continue reporting through the 5 senses. The bills will continue arriving while you assume prosperity. The body may continue presenting symptoms while you assume perfect health. This is where persistence in faith becomes crucial. Every return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled strengthens your new frequency. Every moment lived internally in the desired state builds momentum for its physical manifestation. Goddard reveals that this is the secret behind all great demonstrations. Those who consistently manifest their desires are not people without limiting beliefs. They are people who have learned to consistently operate from the state of the wish fulfilled, regardless of what appearances or their old beliefs might suggest. They have discovered that faith, remaining in the feeling of the fulfilled desire, is the power that transcends all limitations. This understanding radically changes your approach to personal transformation. Instead of years trying to discover why you have certain blocks, you simply assume the state where those blocks don't exist. Instead of fighting against what you don't want, you establish yourself firmly in what you desire. The world of beliefs continues to exist, but you learn to navigate above it in the realm where only faith in the reality of your assumption matters. Everyone possesses 2 distinct perspectives of the world operating simultaneously in their consciousness. The ancient masters recognized this duality and called it the carnal mind and the mind of Christ. Neville Goddard translates these mystical terms into practical language. You differentiate these perspectives as ordinary waking consciousness governed by the senses and controlled imagination governed by desire. The ordinary waking consciousness, the natural focus, is completely absorbed by the world of the 5 senses. It accepts appearances as final facts. It sees poverty and declares, "This is reality." It experiences loneliness and concludes, "I am alone." It observes illness and affirms, "I am sick." This consciousness lives perpetually in the world of effects, always reacting to what has already been created, never perceiving its power to create something new. The controlled imagination governed by desire, the spiritual focus, operates from a causal dimension. It sees the same appearances, but recognizes them as shadows of past states of consciousness. This perspective understands that the physical world is plastic, moldable, and always responding to assumed internal states. It's not a denial of physical appearance. It's the recognition that appearance is effect, not cause. Goddard reveals a transformative truth. Desires don't arise randomly. They originate from the spiritual self as directional impulses, as invitations to experience expanded states of being. When you feel a genuine desire, that deep yearning that persists beyond momentary whims, you're receiving a communication from your 4-dimensional self, indicating a possibility already existing in the infinite field of consciousness. The process of realizing these desires is not forcing the physical world to change. It's creating vivid scenes in imagination that correspond to the wish fulfilled. When you construct these scenes with complete sensory details, seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, you're building a bridge between the spiritual world of imagination and the natural world of the senses. You accurately interpret the impulses of the spiritual self by translating them into specific imaginary experiences. This conscious connection with your true self, with your highest version of yourself, produces a remarkable phenomenon. A greater degree of faith and self-confidence naturally arises. It's not confidence based on external capabilities or past achievements. It's the confidence that comes from knowing that you are the operator of consciousness that creates all experiences. Simultaneously, harmony with the external world arises because you stop fighting against appearances, recognizing them as your own past creations. Navigation between these two focuses becomes a refined art of awareness. During your daily activities, you use the natural focus to interact with the physical world, driving your car, doing your work, talking with people. But you never lose the awareness that this physical world is the outpicturing of internal states. In moments of quietness, especially in the state between waking and sleeping, you deliberately shift to the spiritual focus, completely assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Goddard emphasizes that controlled imagination governed by desire is the precise formula for operating from the spiritual focus. It's not uncontrolled imagination wandering without direction. It's not desire without imagination remaining as powerless yearning. It's the disciplined union of the two. Your imagination consciously directed by your desire, maintained with persistence until the external world conforms to the inner vision. When desire is sufficiently intense, what Goddard calls burning desire, you discover that you can easily imagine yourself being, doing, and having what you've always wanted. Desire provides the motivating energy. Imagination provides the specific form. Persistence in assumption ensures inevitable manifestation. This intensity of desire is not emotional agitation, but a deep certainty of direction, like a compass that always points to the true north of your fulfillment. The tragedy of the common human condition is complete identification with the natural focus. People believe they are their names, their jobs, their circumstances. They have completely forgotten the spiritual focus, that part of them that can instantly assume any state, transcend any limitation, create any reality. They have become prisoners of their own past creations, hypnotized by the shadows on the cave wall, having forgotten that they are the ones projecting these shadows. But you are rediscovering your forgotten power. You're learning that you can consciously choose your focus of perception moment by moment. When confronted with an undesired appearance, you can deliberately shift from the perspective that says, "This is fixed reality," to the perspective that recognizes, "This is only the temporary result of past states of consciousness, and I now choose to emanate a new reality through my disciplined imagination." This ability to alternate between focuses is not a mental trick or a superficial psychological technique. It's the awakening to your true nature as creative consciousness operating in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The distinction between these two focuses explains why two people can experience identical circumstances and have completely different results. One operates from the natural focus, accepting apparent limitations as final. The other operates from the spiritual focus, recognizing that all appearance is temporarily solidified consciousness, always ready to be reshaped by a new assumption held with unshakable conviction. Living in complete connection with the spiritual self completely transforms your ability to navigate life. When you establish this connection, you develop an extraordinary ability, intuitively determining which information is relevant to your vision and which is just noise that should be ignored. This discernment doesn't come through logical analysis or elaborate mental process. It arises as instantaneous knowledge, a certainty that completely bypasses linear reasoning. The sixth sense is your imagination operating at its full power. While the five physical senses report what already exists in the manifest world, the sixth sense perceives what exists in the realm of infinite possibilities. Goddard reveals that imagination is not a lesser faculty or an escape tool. It is the very organ through which you perceive and select from all possible realities the one you will choose to experience. When you truly understand the simultaneous existence of an internal spiritual self and an external natural self, something remarkable happens. Behaviors necessary for your fulfillment begin to naturally integrate into your daily life. You don't need to force behavior changes through iron discipline or willpower. The right actions arise spontaneously because you're operating from the state of consciousness in which those actions are natural and inevitable. Consider how this works. When you internally assume the state of being prosperous, you naturally begin making different financial decisions. Not because someone told you what to do, not because you read it in a book, but because, from the assumed state of prosperity, certain actions are obvious and natural. You stop wasting energy worrying about money and begin seeing opportunities that were always present but invisible to your previous consciousness. Imagination literally represents the source of all possibilities. Everything that has ever been created, invented, built, or manifested existed first in someone's imagination. More importantly, everything that will be created already exists now as a possibility in infinite imagination. You're not creating possibilities. You're selecting from already existing possibilities. This is a crucial distinction that changes everything. Goddard establishes with absolute precision: controlled imagination governed by desire. This formula contains the entire secret of conscious manifestation. Imagination must be controlled, not wandering randomly, but focused with clear intention, and it must be governed by desire, not any passing whim, but that deep desire that resonates with your spiritual self, that yearning that persists and intensifies over time. You always choose what you desire, even when it seems you're choosing what you don't desire. Every state of consciousness you maintain is a choice, conscious or unconscious. When you persistently complain about your situation, you're choosing to perpetuate that situation through the law of assumption. When you mentally dwell in failure scenarios, you're selecting failure from all available possibilities. The question is never whether you're choosing, the question is whether you're choosing consciously or by default. Burning desire naturally facilitates the imagination of the desired state. When you want something with sufficient intensity, you'll discover that you can easily imagine yourself in possession of what you desire. It's not effort, it's natural magnetism. Intense desire acts like a magnet, attracting to your imagination all the scenes, sounds, sensations, and feelings associated with fulfillment. You discover that you can imagine with vivid clarity what you've always deeply desired. The integration of the sixth sense with the five physical senses creates a completely new life experience. You continue seeing with your physical eyes, but now you also see with the eye of imagination. You continue hearing with your physical ears, but you also hear the silent voice of intuition. You continue touching with your physical hands, but you also feel the texture of desired reality in your imagination with equal vividness. This integration eliminates the conflict between the inner and outer worlds. Instead of fighting against physical appearances while trying to maintain a different vision internally, you recognize appearances as echoes of past states while living fully in the new state internally. The five senses continue functioning, but they no longer dictate your reality. They simply report the temporary effects of previous states of consciousness. When you consistently live connected to the spiritual self through the active sixth sense, every decision becomes easier. You don't need to agonize over choices because you intuitively know what's aligned with your assumed vision. Relationships that don't serve naturally dissolve. Aligned opportunities appear with perfect timing. Synchronicities multiply to a degree that defies rational explanation. The integrated sixth sense is your direct line to the infinite intelligence that governs all creation. Through it, you access knowledge that transcends learning, solutions that transcend logic, paths that transcend conventional planning. You become a channel through which the creative power of the universe flows without obstruction, manifesting through you the visions you've selected and maintained in your disciplined imagination. The next step will reveal how this inner power continually transforms all interpretations of reality. The external world you're experiencing at this exact moment is not a fixed objective reality. It's a living theater where every scene, every character, every event faithfully represents your internal interpretations, assumptions, beliefs, and perceptions. This is not a poetic metaphor. It's the literal mechanics of how your experience is constructed moment by moment. Neville Goddard demonstrates that you don't see the world as it is. You see the world as you are, and this world changes instantly when you change your internal interpretations. Every person who crosses your path is playing a role in the script you've unconsciously written through your assumptions about people. Every situation you encounter is a perfect reflection of your deep expectations. Every limitation you experience exists first in your consciousness as an accepted belief. The external world is an impeccable mirror, always reflecting with mathematical precision the content of your consciousness. Goddard illustrates this with a revealing case. A costume designer was convinced that her boss treated her unfairly, criticizing her best work and being deliberately rude. She didn't realize that she maintained intense mental conversations with him every morning, arguing, criticizing, and defending herself. These imaginary conversations were so vivid and emotionally charged that they literally programmed his behavior toward her. When she consciously changed these mental conversations, imagining him praising her work and treating her with kindness, his behavior completely changed. He didn't change. Her interpretation changed, and the external world reorganized itself to reflect this new interpretation. You possess the absolute power to change any interpretation at any moment. This is your greatest power and your greatest responsibility. All information that comes through your five senses is neutral until you assign it meaning. A low bank balance is just numbers until you interpret them as poverty. A harsh word is just a sound until you interpret it as rejection. A closed door is just wood and metal until you interpret it as opportunity denied. Here's the transformative key. All information presented to you by the external world remains merely a suggestion. You have the sovereign power to accept or reject any suggestion based on a single criterion. Does it harmonize with your assumed vision? If your vision is prosperity and someone suggests that hard times are coming, you can choose to completely reject that suggestion, not through denial, but through the conscious choice to maintain your interpretation aligned with your vision. This power of interpretive choice builds the bridge between the five senses and the sixth sense. The five senses present information. The sixth sense, your disciplined imagination, determines the meaning. When you consistently choose interpretations that harmonize with your assumed desires, you develop unshakable inner peace. Storms may roar in the external world, but internally, you remain serene because you know you're observing temporary echoes of past states of consciousness, not permanent realities. The friction in your life never arises from true faith. Faith, as Goddard defines it, is simply remaining in the state of the wish fulfilled. When you truly inhabit this state, there's no resistance, no struggle, no friction. Friction arises exclusively from beliefs about everyday experiences that don't align with your vision. You assume prosperity, but interpret an unexpected bill as a financial problem. You assume health, but interpret a symptom as illness developing. This discrepancy between your assumed vision and your momentary interpretations creates psychological friction that manifests as stress, anxiety, and frustration. Observe how most people live, completely at the mercy of their automatic interpretations. Something bad happens, and they immediately interpret it as evidence that life is difficult, that they're not supported, that the universe is against them. These interpretations solidify into beliefs that then attract more similar experiences, creating a vicious cycle of self-fulfilling prophecy. They don't realize they're actively creating their reality through their interpretations, not just passively observing a pre-existing reality, but you're discovering the secret of conscious transformation. When something apparently negative occurs, you can pause before the automatic interpretation and consciously choose a different meaning. Lost your job? Instead of interpreting it as a disaster, you can interpret it as liberation for something better. Relationship ended? Instead of interpreting it as rejection, you can interpret it as divine alignment, making room for true love. Each conscious reinterpretation rewrites the script of your personal theater. Goddard emphasizes that you're constantly maintaining mental conversations that program the world's responses. If you mentally argue with people, they will physically argue with you. If you mentally appreciate them, they will physically appreciate you. If you see yourself as a victim in your internal conversations, the world will provide villains. If you see yourself as blessed in your internal dialogue, the world will provide blessings. Inner harmony naturally arises when your interpretations consistently align with your vision. You stop being thrown back and forth by every external event because you've developed a stable interpretive center. This center is your assumed vision, your desired state accepted as real. All sensory information is filtered through this center and receives meaning based on its relevance to your vision. This is the supreme art of conscious living, keeping your interpretations under disciplined control, always choosing meanings that support and strengthen your assumed vision. The world will continue presenting all kinds of suggestions, but you become the master selector, accepting only what harmonizes with who you've decided to be. The next step will reveal the universal principle that governs this entire process of mental creation. The Hermetic teachings about the mental creation of the universe explain a fundamental truth that illuminates the entire process of manifestation through consciousness. At the beginning of the creative cycle, the All projects its will from the aspect of being into the aspect of becoming, initiating the process of creation. This movement of consciousness is not a distant historical event. It's the ongoing process through which all experience is created, including yours at this exact moment. This process is called involution, when the creator becomes so involved in its mental creation that it almost forgets its own existence, temporarily living in its creation. It's exactly what happens when you identify so completely with your circumstances that you forget you created them through your assumed states of consciousness. You become so involved in the drama of limitation that you forget your unlimited power to assume any state. Goddard reveals that you achieve the state of flow or the zone when you completely integrate the five senses with the sixth sense. This is not an unattainable mystical state, it's the natural result of aligning your sensory perception with your disciplined imagination. In this state, you stop experiencing conflict between what your senses report and what your imagination holds as true. The two perspectives merge into a unified experience. When you achieve this integration, something extraordinary happens. You no longer see experiences as stressful in relation to your vision. Instead, Every experience is recognized as a correspondence between internal laws and external phenomena. What you maintain internally as a state of consciousness must, by law, manifest externally as condition, circumstance, or event. There are no exceptions to this law. The principle of correspondence establishes that the exterior always reflects the interior. Your external world is not a separate reality that you must conquer or defend yourself from. It's the three-dimensional projection of your four-dimensional states of consciousness. Every person, situation, and circumstance in your life is an exact correspondence of some internal state you've maintained, consciously or unconsciously. When you deeply understand this principle, you realize that you're never fighting against external conditions. You're always working only with internal states. External poverty corresponds to an internal state of consciousness of lack. External illness corresponds to an internal state of consciousness of dis-ease. External loneliness corresponds to an internal state of consciousness of separation. Change the internal state, and the external correspondence must change to maintain harmony with the law. The all projecting its will from being into becoming is exactly what you do every time you assume a state of consciousness. When you say, I am, you're in the aspect of being, pure consciousness, infinite possibility. When you add any qualification, I am prosperous, I am healthy, I am loved, you're projecting from being into becoming, directing infinite consciousness into a specific expression. Involution explains why it's so easy to forget your creative power. You become so involved in the creation, your body, your circumstances, your relationships, that you temporarily forget you are the creator. You get lost in the role you're playing, forgetting that you're also the author of the play, the director, and all the other characters. This forgetting is necessary for the complete experience, but awakening within the experience is the next stage of conscious evolution. In the flow state, when the five senses and the sixth sense operate in perfect harmony, you experience life without friction. The right actions arise spontaneously. The right words flow naturally. The right decisions become obvious. You're not forcing anything. You're allowing infinite intelligence to operate through you without obstruction. This is the state where great athletes break records, where artists create masterpieces, and where inventors make revolutionary discoveries. The correspondence between internal laws and external phenomena means you can always read your internal state by observing your external conditions. But more importantly, it means you can always change your external conditions by changing your internal states, not through forced action in the physical world, but through the disciplined assumption of new states of consciousness that then manifest as new physical conditions. Every problem in your life is an external correspondence of an internal state that can be changed. Every limitation is an invitation to assume an unlimited state. Every apparent impossibility is an opportunity to demonstrate that with consciousness, truly all things are possible. You're not at the mercy of circumstances. You are the creator of circumstances through the states of consciousness you choose to maintain. This understanding completely transforms your relationship with life. You stop being a victim and become a conscious creator. You stop reacting and begin emanating. You stop fighting against the shadows and begin working with the light that projects the shadows. All power is in your consciousness, in your ability to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and remain faithful to that assumption until the external world reorganizes itself to correspond. All change begins with understanding your role as co-creator, and the only way to connect with this divine intelligence is through meditation. We've developed a set of audio tools to help you access this higher state of consciousness. To learn more and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, write in the comments. It made sense to me,